So we're home now, and I brought the elephant ear out here. I'm gonna pot everything up. It's a beautiful evening, so it's just fun to do this. Do you guys save plants that sometimes don't make sense, like tropicals? It's fun to do because you don't have to have a greenhouse. I have a plant room, but it's not unlike any normal garage, bedroom, whatever we do to retrofit to try to keep plants, and that's what we're gonna do with these. So I put in here my organic potting soil that I always use. You know I love Espoma potting soil because it's a great starter with organic matter in it. It has some great compost in it. It's a good soil. Now, since I am starting these elephant ear pretty much like a new plant, like their roots have been ripped up, they're really being started. I like to put in the biotone starter because again, that's just a beginning fertilizer. It's an organic, so it's not like a synthetic fertilizer. Instead, what it does is it just adds some great fungi to the soil that really helps something get started. And that's what you want. You know, this is gonna be a stressful thing for this, to be going from growing beautifully in a container to having a different container to start growing in. And so anytime you stress a plant, anything you can do to kind of stave that off, that's what I want to do. So that's why I use biotone, just like I do when I plant things in the ground. So I'm going to plant it about the same depth it was. It doesn't have a lot of root structure, so I may need to stake it. This was a little string Grandma had put on to try to tie it up, which that we can take off now because it won't probably work the same way. So now that I have it in here, I'm going to start putting soil in around it. And what I want to make sure to do is put the soil and pack it tight enough that it gives it a little bit of a sturdy, solid beginning. So as I'm doing this, you know, potting soil is really light. It has a lot of air in it, and it has a lot of, because you want that, you want it to drain well. But I also want to make sure it's in here well enough that it will hold this elephant ear in place. I just potted up the second one. Now, what you're gonna notice is whenever you take something in that's tall outside like this and you cut it out, there's usually no way you can get the whole root ball. So it's not gonna have the root strength that is way out laterally to hold up the height of the plant. So this one is really top heavy. It wants to just fall over. You could stake it, but what you also notice is some of these leaves are pretty wind whipped, pretty wind torn, and those are already some new leaves coming out of the center. That's how elephant ear grow. So I'm gonna actually take off some of these outer leaves, and I actually like to do this anytime I'm really repotting something and causing it possibly a lot of stress. I like to take off some of the outer leaves. It just helps have a little bit less for the plant in the sense that it doesn't need quite as much energy then. It doesn't need to be taking up as much water. So it's a good way to kind of slow the plant down a bit and give it just a little bit of a reprieve so it can grow and focus on root growth and on this new shoot it's sending out. And it also just makes it so it's not quite so topsy-turvy. So I have one nice leaf here, I have a new one wanting to come. And you can do the same thing and clean up, you know, any plant. So when I take my agave in for the winter, I do the same thing. I clean up any of the bad pieces, put them in my plant room once they're cleaned up. Do the same thing then when I bring them out in the spring, I'll clean them up. So same with this one. You know, it's gonna look bad the first moment maybe you bring it in because you had to take it out of its previous container and put it in a new one. But really, going around, this one actually doesn't look that bad. It's actually looking pretty good, so I'll probably just leave it. So at the end, you always want to, of course, water it. Watering it just like you would any new plant. And then once you take it in, the watering is going to be different than it is outside. You know, outdoors, any plant gets all the elements of the wind, all the elements of a full sun, and so it can dry out a plant quicker. Inside, it's really best to let plants dry out completely before you continually water them. I just find, especially for all the plants I keep, that works best. So these plants are ready to go into the plant room before the freezing temperatures this weekend. And I hope what this shows you is, guess what? We're not all know-it-alls in the garden. We learn as we go, and that's the same thing with this. I take plants, I save them, I learn each year something new, maybe keep them looking healthier the next year, but it's a lot easier to keep plants thriving than you think. You can put them in a sunny window, you can put them in your basement with grow lights, whatever works for you, but that's what's gonna work for me for these. So I hope it gives you inspiration to think, if I can do it, believe me, you can too. That's the point. So Grandma's planter is out of clothes for this year, but I think it worked out pretty well. It really filled in and it looks good. So happy gardening. Get your plants in before frost. That's the important thing.